Are you kidding me? How can you be so spineless? The law is on your side. Public decency is on your side. Just say something. Reading the pathetic downfall of the main character who share my name, I scoffed, my voice dripping with pity and contempt. Okay, fine, you get stabbed to death the first time around. Whatever. But you get a second chance, a complete do-over. And when the other guy practically breaks your jaw, your only response is a cold smile? What? Are you trying to freeze him to death? And the best part, your ultimate revenge is to just walk away and watch them torture each other in a miserable life. What if they actually end up happy? Then you're the joke. Why would they give a second chance to a loser like you? I'd stumbled across another one of those rage bait stories on my feed, and it was so infuriating I thought I was going to have a heart attack. The protagonist, Ethan, is a brilliant young fashion designer, the Doormat version. In his previous life, right before a major design competition, his girlfriend and her childhood sweetheart stole his portfolio. He was immediately buried in accusations of plagiarism and a vicious online hate campaign. But the girlfriend, Jessica, worried that Ethan might make a comeback and stand in the way of her sweetheart's rise to fame, decided to finish the job. She deliberately leaked Ethan's schedule for the competition, using a sob story to whip up online mobs. An enraged follower cornered Ethan and stabbed him to death with a fruit knife. He opens his eyes, reborn before the competition. Ethan decides to wall off his heart and focus. For the sake of revenge, he endures his girlfriend's mockery and the constant provocations and beatings from her lover, his only defense a cold, permanent smile. Everything is a countdown to the 14-day design competition, until his girlfriend's scheme to switch the designs is exposed, and her sweetheart misses his shot at the grand prize. Disgraced, the two of them have no choice but to move back to their dead-end hometown and get married. Their marriage is a miserable grind of bills and groceries. They have 2 kids and live a hollow, uneventful life. In their old age, they even win the lottery, forced to live out their days with more money than they can spend, regretting their youthful mistakes. You know, the thing you want most when you're young but can't have will haunt you for the rest of your life. I have so many regrets that I didn't dump that spineless loser sooner. Meanwhile, Ethan, armed with nothing but his beloved cold smile, lives a lonely, broke, and sickly life, imagining that one day, things might get better. Pathetic. You are so pathetic. I clutch my chest, grinding my teeth in frustration. Just then, a voice echoed in my head. Oh yeah, you're not pathetic? You think you could do better? Then you go. You're damn right I can do better. I'm not a coward like you. Somehow, I knew exactly who I was talking to, the protagonist. Filled with nothing but disdain for that doormat, I shot back without mercy. Heh, fine, let's make a bet. If you lose, you can stay trapped in that world forever. If you win, I'll give you. The next thing I knew, everything went black, and I passed out. And then, I became the protagonist of that story. Plagiarizing hack, and a homewrecker too. Get him. We'd be doing the world a favor. There's safety in numbers. Let's get him. Don't let him get away. I had just arrived in this new reality, my head still spinning, when the fist started flying. It felt like being caught in a hailstorm. In the chaos, I caught a glimpse of a young man and woman standing off to the side, watching like it was a show. Their faces were alight with the smug satisfaction of a successful scheme, mixed with a deep, genuine contempt. The original character's memories flooded my mind. I knew exactly who they were. The woman was his girlfriend, Jessica Evans. The man was her childhood sweetheart, Kyle Roberts, the so-called one that got away, who had supposedly haunted her for life. I'm not the kind of guy who backs down, but this was a nightmare opening scene. I couldn't even get my bearings, let alone fight back. All I could do was try to weather the storm. As I curled up and tried to roll away from the frenzied mob, a hulking man in a hoodie with a grim look on his face pushed through the crowd. He pulled out a glinting fruit knife, roaring, "The one thing I can't stand in this world is a pretty boy leech. You almost ruined a perfect couple. I'm gonna kill you." This had to be him, the enraged fan from the story who killed the original protagonist. He must have been mainlining the toxic Kool-Aid Jessica had been brewing online. Without a moment's hesitation, he lunged, aiming the knife straight for my stomach. A flash of cold steel. Shunk! Ugh! The searing pain in my abdomen almost made me black out. Cornered and desperate, my consciousness gave way to pure instinct. I don't remember much of what happened next. I just recall the waves of agony from my stomach, my vision blurring with each pulse of pain. I think my survival instincts took over. I remember biting down hard on something, on someone. I was fighting back with pure, animalistic aggression. No thought of defense, only attack. But the details are a blur. I think the crowd suddenly got a lot louder. Someone started singing Baby Shark, of all things, their terrified voice horribly off-key. Then, like a flock of startled chickens, the mob scattered with screams. And finally, I had won myself a moment of peace. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed. Every inch of my body ached. "Oh, honey, you're finally awake. We were so worried. If anything had happened to you, what would we have done?" Oh, God. Hearing my parents' choked sobs twisted something in my gut. The original Ethan's poor judgment and his spineless tolerance had nearly destroyed this family. But that was about to change. Curious, I asked my parents what had happened after I passed out. From them, I learned the details, which were even grimmer than the story had let on. Most of the people who attacked me were local social media users, riled up by paid trolls hired by Kyle Roberts. A few of the instigators in the crowd were actually relatives of Jessica and Kyle. As for the stranger who tried to kill me with a fruit knife, he was just some random guy online. After reading Jessica's slanderous, viral post, he became so enraged that he used the location information she deliberately leaked to hunt me down. But in my unconscious counterattack, I had latched onto his neck and torn open his carotid artery. I had passed out from my own injuries. My organs were damaged, and though surgery had saved me, I need to stay in the hospital for observation. But he bled out and died at the scene. Jessica's tactic of leaking my schedule in a viral post was clearly malicious, but she probably never imagined it would lead to someone's death. Or, more accurately, she never imagined the person dying wouldn't be me, but the extremist she had incited. What she really didn't expect was that the guy had written what was essentially a suicide note before he came after me, laying out his entire motivation in detail. So, what was meant to be his righteous manifesto before committing murder became ironclad proof that Jessica and Kyle had orchestrated the whole thing. They had played themselves. Now, the outside world was in chaos. And so was my mind. If I had to guess, the entity who sent me here wasn't evil enough to want me to die in the first act. He was petty. He threw me in at the very end of the first timeline just to make me suffer what he went through before giving me the same do-over he got. But he never counted on me being this stubborn. Instead of quietly dying and getting a reboot, I took the Rage-aholic attacker down with me. Now I was an anomaly, stranded outside the original plot. If I wanted justice, I'd have to get it myself. But then, my mom gave me a piece of news that felt like a lifeline. While I was unconscious, a lawyer had contacted them, offering to take my case. And she was standing right outside my hospital room. No deals, Ms. Dawson. Thank you so much for offering to help. Looking at the young woman in the sharp business suit, her serious expression still holding a trace of youthful earnestness, I was genuinely grateful. Honestly, in my current situation, I desperately needed a lawyer. I didn't even care how experienced she was. Just having someone to answer my questions was a godsend. Claire Dawson was a young attorney who had just passed the bar last year. She had a scholarly air that, combined with her natural charm, gave her a captivating, intelligent beauty. She seemed a little shy holding the fruit basket she'd brought, but the unwavering determination in her eyes struck a chord with me. "It's nothing. I saw your story online, and I figured you might need legal representation given the circumstances, so I decided to come and see if I could help." After a brief chat, Claire told me that the attacker's family had already been to the hospital to cause a scene, screaming that I needed to pay with my life. She had called security and had them removed. Seeing the lingering anxiety on my parents' faces, Claire offered a reassuring smile. "Under state law, this is a textbook case of self-defense during an active assault," she explained. "The other party came at you with a deadly weapon with clear intent to kill, while you were unarmed and being mobbed. We have video footage and eyewitnesses. The evidence is clear. You won't face any criminal liability." Her professional explanation visibly calmed my parents, and I felt a wave of gratitude. This young woman, Claire Dawson, seemed to glow with a righteous light when she smiled. After chatting a bit more with my parents, Claire left her contact information before she left telling us to call her with any legal questions. I just didn't expect I'd need her help again so soon. Not long after Claire left, as if drawn by the scent of blood, Jessica's parents showed up, and they made the most ludicrous request. "Ethan, dear, Jess just made a silly mistake. She was confused. Don't take it to heart." Jessica's mother, who had always been sharp-tongued with me, was suddenly dripping with false sweetness. But her smile was hollow, her eyes filled with calculation. "And Kyle, we've known that boy since he was little. He's a good kid. He was just worried about Jess. Think about it. If Jess has someone else to look after her, it'll be less pressure on you, right? Listen to me, honey. You have to be magnanimous in life, forgive and forget. No one wants a petty man who holds a grudge." As she spoke, her true nature started to leak through, her tone reverting to its familiar condescension. But she quickly remembered she was here to ask for a favor and plastered on that sickeningly fake smile again, her eyes cold as ice. Too bad for her. I wasn't the original Doormat. I wasn't buying it. "Ma'am, I'm petty, I do hold a grudge, and I keep score. Your daughter, my girlfriend, and her childhood friend used online lies to send a killer after me who nearly gutted me. You know this. The sight of you makes me sick, and it's not helping my recovery. Please leave before I call security." The other patients in the ward already knew who I was and the basics of what happened, but that didn't stop me from saying it all again as loudly as I could. I was an outsider to this world. I had no shame. You did the crime, so don't be surprised when I broadcast it. Under the suspicious glares of the other patients, family members, and nurses, Jessica's mother's face went from pale to red, then to a sickly green. Finally, she fled, muttering curses under her breath. The next day, it was Jessica's father's turn. He was more polite, but after a few minutes of pleasantries, he got to the point. He tried to use a marriage to Jessica as bait, demanding I write a sworn statement declaring that the entire situation with him, Jessica, and Kyle was a misunderstanding. He wanted me to say that the extremist who attacked me was someone I'd provoked through a personal conflict and that it had nothing to do with Jessica and Kyle. He also wanted a letter forgiving Jessica and Kyle for their online smear campaign and for stealing my designs. And to top it all off, he wanted me to agree to help get them out of jail. Faced with such an absurd proposal, I flatly refused. Then I held up my phone, showing the active voice recorder app. Rage flashed in his eyes. For a long moment, he seemed to be debating whether to lunge for the phone. Finally, he too turned and fled. His slow brain finally did something smart. Because I knew this wouldn't be simple, I'd had my mom go to Best Buy yesterday and pick up 3-pen recorders and a small body camera. Hospital rules prevented me from using the camera, but all 3 recorders were running. The old man's caution had saved him from making things much, much worse for himself. But a family that could raise someone like Jessica wasn't going to give up easily. Even before I was discharged, the attacks came one after another. First, mediators tried to convince us to settle things quietly. Citing legal precedent, we refused. After talking with Claire, we insisted on pursuing a civil suit alongside the criminal charges. Jessica was cornered, so her family started harassing my parents at home, hoping to intimidate us into backing down. They continued spreading lies online, trying to paint my family as villains, hoping that the loudest and most aggressive party would win. At the same time, Jessica and Kyle's fan base mobilized. Jessica was a minor influencer and had often played up the romantic childhood sweethearts angle with Kyle, the genius designer she had built up. Over time, she'd cultivated a dedicated base of shippers. A portion of these fans refused to believe their idols had done anything wrong and jumped into the fray. They spread rumors, bullied me online, and even followed my parents around town. The family of the extremist who nearly killed me also started making noise. His wife and parents brought their kids to the hospital, raising hell. They threw paint on our front door, demanding I give them an explanation. Every other sentence was, "You killed the breadwinner of our family. You're a murderer." Their demand was laughable. They wanted me to pay them a huge sum of money and cover the living expenses for the wife and kids for the rest of their lives. That was the last straw. I was furious. Were they all just kicking me while I was down? I may seem like a nice guy, but I'm not a pushover. I refused to believe it. With the law as my weapon, I was going to get justice, and I was going to do it standing tall. 3. Hitting the weak point. The day I was discharged, I aimed my first counterattack at the attacker's family. the ones hiding behind the respect for the dead argument. They were the loudest and most vicious. I hired a couple of security guards to accompany me, just in case. The family of the man, Mark Peterson, was clearly not expecting me to show up at their door, still recovering from my injuries and flanked by two large men. Their eyes filled with alarm. "You want me to pay you?" "That's not how this works," I started, my voice hard and loud. "Your husband was manipulated into coming after a complete stranger with a knife. He stabbed me 8 times. That's a crime. That's attempted murder. Do you understand what I'm saying? Mark was trying to murder me." Some people in this world only understand force. You have to be tougher and louder than they are. Mark's wife and parents, who had been ready for a fight, immediately deflated. "But you didn't die," his wife stammered. "Mark is the one who's dead. Shouldn't you compensate us?" According to the state's self-defense statutes, a person is not liable for civil damages for injuries caused in a justifiable act of self-defense. They also bear no criminal responsibility, Claire stated calmly. In your husband's case, the evidence is overwhelming. The weapon and other physical evidence have been secured by the police. He initiated a surprise attack with a deadly weapon, demonstrating a clear intent to take Mr. Miller's life. Based on the facts, a finding of justifiable self-defense is almost certain. Claire's explanation, delivered in a measured tone, landed like a thunderclap. I hadn't wanted her to come, worried that things might get ugly and she'd get caught in the middle. But when she heard my plan, she insisted on joining me, and I couldn't refuse her kindness. Seeing Mark's family about to argue with Claire, I cut them off. "If you insist on getting money from me, then let me lay it out for you," I snarled. "Your husband had a knife. I was unarmed. He tried to kill me, and I ended up in the hospital. If I take you to court over this, you won't be getting a dime from me. In fact, you will be paying my medical bills. It's a slam-dunk case. Go ask any lawyer you want." Panic flickered across their faces. Seeing my opening, I pressed on, asking them who gave them the idea to demand money from me. As I suspected, it was Jessica's father. "You're being fools. The Evans family is using you as a weapon," I said, my voice rising. "I didn't know your husband. Why would he want to kill me? It's because of Jessica's viral post. Mark died because Jessica incited him. In that case, you should be suing the Evans family for wrongful death, funeral expenses, and punitive damages. I had done my homework before coming here. I laid out the facts, backed by logic. It's hard for a family to lose a loved one. I'm being generous here, pointing you in the right direction. What you do with that information is up to you." They had only come after me because they were desperate, grasping at straws. My showing up at their door with security, my unwavering stance, and my aggressive opening had shown them one thing. I was not a soft target. I was a brick wall. Combined with a clear, targeted explanation of their legal options, the family's expressions shifted from aggression to conflict. "You can start by negotiating with the Evans family," Claire added gently. "If you need it, I can offer some legal aid resources. They owe you this compensation. The law is on your side." Claire's words were the final hammer blow. The hesitation in their eyes vanished, replaced by a glimmer of hatred. I knew then that I had won. After we left, I looked at Claire, who seemed much more cheerful, and felt a pang of guilt. "I really can't thank you enough for all this," I said, trying to make my tone as sincere as possible. "But Ms. Dawson, I need you to understand that this is a huge mess I'm in. This legal battle is going to be long and ugly. Your career is just starting. Wasting too much time and energy on my case could hurt you." Claire just smiled. A complex emotion flickered in her eyes, but she didn't explain. Instead, she just confirmed our next meeting. I didn't know her real reason for helping me, but I owed her a debt I would never forget. Ethan Miller, always pay my debts. If I ever got the chance, I would repay her kindness. The war escalates just as planned. Mark Peterson's family began raising hell with the Evans family. His wife had even started consulting with Claire on how to file a lawsuit against Jessica Evans and Kyle Roberts for incitement to violence resulting in death through online defamation. But it wasn't all good news on my end. My former employer, likely pressured by the commotion from Jessica's relatives, put me on indefinite leave. The message was clear: don't come back to work until you've sorted out your mess. But it didn't matter. I was actually looking for more free time. It was a blessing in disguise. So, while I sent my old company a wrongful termination lawsuit gift basket, I used my newfound time to launch a methodical counteroffensive. Step 1. Start a YouTube channel and social media accounts. The theme? Documenting the entire insane legal case happening to me and educating people about their rights along the way. And of course, using facts to absolutely demolish my dear ex-girlfriend Jessica and her wonderful friend Kyle. I was still waiting for the official self-defense ruling from the DA's office. But that didn't stop me from sharing the publishable details of my case online, helping others learn from my mistakes so they wouldn't fall for a sociopath and nearly die for it. I shared my entire process, collecting evidence, preparing documents, and navigating the legal system, hoping to help others in similar situations. I also publicly announced the targets of my first wave of lawsuits. Jessica's relatives who had harassed my family, spread lies, and cost me my job, and the most vocal and vicious leaders of Jessica and Kyle's fan club. I honestly couldn't understand how these people could be so brazen, as if the law simply didn't exist. Jessica's relatives had broken into my parents' home, smashing things and threatening them, thinking they could scare me into silence. The fan club leaders were even worse, coordinating attacks across every platform, creating hateful memes, photoshopping my face onto grotesque images, and posting RIP comments on my and even Claire's accounts. I heard one of them was even trying to put a hit on us on the dark web. Did they not realize my family was now wearing body cams and had recorders on them at all times? Did they not know about screenshots and screen recordings? Especially the online trolls. Their lack of basic internet security was astounding. Many of them were harassing me using their real names. They saved me the trouble of doing any research. I have no idea how they could be so vile and shameless. As I gathered evidence, I started to feel a sense of mission, a duty to bring them to justice for the good of everyone. A straightforward civil suit like this takes about 3 to 6 months to resolve, maybe 6 to 18 months for more complex cases. My mindset was victory or death. I was going to wield the law like a sword and cut down these monsters. Time was not an issue. I had the energy and the resources to outlast them all. At first, neither Jessica's family nor the fan club took me seriously. They thought I was just grandstanding. Instead of backing off, they doubled down. One of the main trolls even posted a video of himself holding up his driver's license, shouting, "Ethan Miller, you think you're so tough? I'm right here. Come and sue me." Since he asked so nicely, I added him to the first round of lawsuits. Their arrogance lasted for 2 more weeks. Then, Claire and I went live on YouTube. We showed our audience the official ruling declaring my actions as justifiable self-defense. We displayed a mountain of compiled evidence and announced that we would be filing the civil suits against Jessica's relatives the very next day. We then, still on the live stream, used the court's e-filing portal to submit the initial complaint against the fan club leaders and the troll who had so graciously volunteered. The entire process was completely transparent. My and Claire's followers went wild. Ethan is actually doing it. Jessica's relatives and the fan club members who were watching were stunned. Oh God, he's not bluffing. By the time we ended the stream, my old phone was blowing up. Probably threats or people begging for mercy. Whatever. It was too late to talk about settling. That was a joke. Watching Claire let out a sigh of relief after we went offline, I felt a complex mix of emotions, mostly concern for her. Even after all this, the young woman had never told me why she was helping me, and she's never asked for a dime. But I knew how much it was costing her. Claire's law firm had already talked to her about her involvement in my case, even threatening to terminate her contract. Claire refused to back down, which was essentially a death sentence for her career at that firm. Simple words of thanks felt too cheap. I chose to show my gratitude through action. "You worked so hard. Your voice is hoarse. Let me get you some warm water. Then I'll check if the soup is ready. Didn't you say last time you preferred chicken and dumpling soup over beef stew? I made sure to get everything right this time. You have to try it." The young woman smiled and nodded. I went to the kitchen to put the finishing touches on dinner. At the same time, a single thought consumed me. I've come this far. There's no turning back. Even if it's just to give Claire the victory she deserves, I have to see this through to the end, no matter what. The war drags on. The typical timeline for a civil lawsuit goes something like this. Phase 1 is evidence gathering, which can take a while, and identifying the defendants and the correct court jurisdiction. Phase 2, the court reviews the filing within about a week. You pay the fees, and the case is officially on the docket. Phase 3 is pretrial preparation, which takes 1 to 2 months. This is when Jessica's family and the fan club leaders would get a special delivery from a process server. Phase 4 is the trial itself, which usually happens within 3 to 6 months of filing. Finally, there's the verdict, enforcement, and any potential appeals. Thanks to the kind and brilliant Claire Dawson, whose help and advice were invaluable, like suggesting we get some of the fans' online threats notarized as evidence. Even a legal novice like me could navigate the complex process. After that, I worked like a machine. The hammer of justice fell like rain, striking the lawless Evans and Roberts families and the extremist fans who believed that cruelty was strength and online harassment was a victimless crime. Because Jessica and Kyle's original crimes, incitement to commit murder, public disturbance, and copyright infringement, were serious felonies, their case was being handled by the state. The police had arrested the 2 lovebirds the day of the attack. They were still in custody, awaiting trial. All the frantic efforts from their families were just a desperate attempt to get me to lie on the stand to reduce their sentences. And the extremist fans? They just loved the drama, thinking that from behind screen, they were untouchable gods. If the original Ethan hadn't died, he might have actually caved, signed a bunch of false statements, and lived out the plot of that terrible story, going to jail himself, then getting out only to watch Jessica and her man live happily ever after. But they didn't run into him. They ran into me. Just as the prosecutor's office was formally charging the happy couple, Jessica's family and several of the fan leaders were served with summonses. I could just imagine the tears of joy streaming down their faces when they received my little gifts. The fans that got served were terrified, but the ones who hadn't been sued yet just seemed to multiply like a digital hydra. They hired bots and rallied even more clueless extremists to launch a new wave of attacks against me and Claire. Maybe it's just hard to get the full story out there. Not everyone knew the details of how I'd fought back against the man Jessica sent to kill me. So, a lot of people lurking in the shadows felt perfectly safe attacking us. But I was fearless. I carefully sifted through the noise, picking out the loudest and most obnoxious trolls and preparing my second, third, and even fourth waves of lawsuits. One afternoon, "Don't cry. If you keep crying, you won't look as pretty." The cheesy line had barely left my lips before I wanted to slap myself. What can I say? I've been a hopelessly awkward guy in 2 lifetimes. I have 0 experience with crying women. Claire didn't say anything, just continued to cry softly. It was so strange. Just an hour ago, we were at a martial arts gym, and she was full of energy and laughing. Even when she told me she had quit her job to focus entirely on my case, she was so cheerful that I wondered if the stress had finally broken her. I never could have predicted this. When I told her how guilty I felt and that she should prioritize her career, she didn't cry. When I joked that our social media channels were making decent money and we could just become full-time legal educators online and support each other, she didn't cry. When I said, "If I have 1 bite of food, I'll give it all to you. Then I'll go mug a little girl for her lollipop and give you half," she didn't cry. She laughed and called me a child. But when I told her I'm going to set up an anti-cyberbullying foundation and a portion of all my future earnings will go into it to help thousands of people like us fight back and defend themselves, that's when she started crying. Hard. Did I accidentally hit a nerve? You idiot. That's the worst way to comfort someone. Claire almost laughed through her tears at my clumsy attempts. Just then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a young man in a hoodie walking towards us, his head down. His posture, his gait. It was exactly like Mark Peterson, the man who had tried to execute me. "Look out." I yanked Claire back and started running. The young man, seeing we'd spotted him, broke into a sprint. Damn it. All I did was make a few memes and write a few stories online. I was fighting for justice, and you dared to collect my info and sue me. You got me fired. My girlfriend dumped me. You deserve to die. This is what you owe me. Glinting in the young man's hand was a fruit knife. Seeing that Claire was frozen in fear, I shoved her out of the way, took a running leap, and delivered a flying kick straight to his face. From the moment I decided to fight back with the law, I knew I'd have to deal with threats outside the courtroom. The combat training I started as soon as I recovered was for this exact moment. The man cried out and fell to the ground, the knife skittering away. I lunged, pinning him down. Claire, snapping out of it, screamed for help. A few passersby realized what was happening and rushed over to help restrain him. And just like that, another one of our online admirers was subdued and taken away by the police. Seeing Claire still trembling with fear, I pulled her into a hug, my heart aching with guilt for dragging her into all this danger. But when she silently wrapped her arms around me and buried her face in my chest, all the chaotic thoughts in my mind went quiet. This woman, she was warm and soft, and holding her felt so right. Comforting her was important. I just hold on for a little while longer. Claire's confession. The hooded young man confessed to everything. He thought harassing people online was a joke, but getting sued was a tragedy. When he was served, his reputation was somehow ruined, he lost his job, and his life fell apart. He wanted revenge. And Jessica's father, still furious that I refused to help get his daughter out of jail, had finally shown his teeth. He had somehow contacted this guy and helped him plan the attack. Great. Jessica's father had just earned himself a starring role as an accomplice to attempted murder. My next round of lawsuits just got a new name at the top of the list. The old man had finally stepped in it, and he was about to get a face full of legal consequences. After that incident, Claire and I grew much closer. We hadn't officially defined our relationship, but we were already acting like a couple. Claire was a wonderful woman. The more time I spent with her, the more I saw her incredible qualities. Gentle, kind, thoughtful, brave, and strong. Maybe it was because of these golden qualities that she had offered me a lifeline when I was drowning. To have a woman like this in my life, I was the luckiest man alive. It never even crossed my mind to compare her to Jessica. Putting them in the same thought was an insult to Claire. The night we announced on our stream that we were establishing the Anti-Cyberbullying Foundation to provide free legal aid to victims, Claire was curled up next to me. She finally told me why she had been so determined to help me. It turned out that Claire had lost her parents at a young age and was raised by her older brother. And her brother had gone through a situation almost identical to mine. His wife, the person he trusted most in the world, had betrayed him for her adoptive younger brother. She used my brother's years of hard work as a stepping stone to destroy him. What followed was a relentless wave of online harassment orchestrated by his wife and her new partner. It took a long time for Claire's brother, with her help, to pull himself out of his despair and decide to fight back legally. But before he could, an extremist fan, incited by his wife's lies, ambushed him outside his apartment and stabbed him to death. When I saw what was happening to you, it was like seeing my brother's past all over again, she whispered. But you're different. You're so much stronger, so much more resilient than he was. Ethan, getting to know you, being inspired by your sheer will. It's made me so happy. As Claire entrusted her whole story to me, I finally understood what had driven her to become a lawyer. Looking at the lingering sadness in her tear-filled eyes, I pulled her into a tight embrace and made a silent promise. Our lawsuits continued. More and more of the once arrogant fans, trolls, and bots, either realizing the full truth and turning on their instigators, or simply terrified of the consequences, began to backpedal. Some started their own live streams, crying and repenting for their actions, begging us not to sue them. Some we could forgive, others we could not. Actions have consequences. It's only fair. At the same time, our foundation started helping other victims. With our support, people who had been silenced by fear were finally able to use the law to reclaim their dignity. Before we knew it, Claire and I had become famous, known across the country as cyber crusaders for justice. Some people thought I was too vengeful, secretly calling me the cyber vigilante. I embraced the title. I even started a new segment on our stream where, after finalizing a list of new lawsuit targets, I draw a name from a hat to decide who to sue first. The stunt scared even more of the trolls into submission. Cyber vigilante. It had a nice ring to it. The trial of Jessica Evans and Kyle Roberts took place 6 months after the day I was stabbed. As the primary victim, I was there to testify. It turns out that when there isn't a spineless doormat to sabotage the case, the kind of law-defying plot from that story is just a fast track to a prison cell. Jessica's most serious crime was incitement to murder. Her viral posts were carefully crafted to provoke hatred, and she had deliberately pinned a comment revealing my exact location, which directly led to Mark Peterson's actions and his subsequent death. Given her profound malice and lack of remorse, The judge started with a baseline of 10 years. But she was also guilty of hiring trolls for a harassment campaign and of copyright infringement for helping Kyle steal my designs. With all charges combined, she was sentenced to 15 years in prison. Her dear Kyle, who had been her accomplice and co-conspirator every step of the way, received the same convictions and was sentenced to 10 years. Ethan, you bastard. Why couldn't you have just died? All I wanted was to make life a little easier for Kyle. What's so wrong with that? You're so talented. He's not like you. Why couldn't you just help him, be a bigger person, and just die? As they were led away, unlike Kyle, who looked like a wilted vegetable, Jessica's screams were piercing, her eyes filled with venomous hatred. But what did I care? See you in 15 years, my dear ex-girlfriend. I'm walking out of this courthouse to go get a marriage license with my Claire. Hope you have a great time in prison. 7. The end. Jessica did not have a great time in prison, but she was apparently a model inmate. So after only 10 years, she was released. When she got out, her mother, now disabled, was there to meet her, pushing a wheelchair, carrying an equally crippled Kyle Roberts. Kyle had gotten out after 7 years. He wasn't sticking with the Evans family for love. He was a disgraced felon with nowhere else to go. Jessica's father wasn't there. His picture was hanging on a wall at home. The reason for that involved another one of Jessica's old sins. Mark Peterson's family, struggling financially, had continued to harass the Evans family for money. But the Evans family, while guilty, had already paid court-ordered damages in the wrongful death suit. You can't keep demanding payment for the same debt. Eventually, the two families and their friends got into a massive brawl. The outcome was bloody. I won't go into the details. The post-prison Jessica felt none of her old affection when she saw her former childhood sweetheart. They immediately started blaming each other, and their argument escalated into a physical fight right outside the prison gates. They were almost sent back inside. I know all this because I've kept a close eye on everyone involved in our past, especially recently. I had just used legal means to gather evidence of criminal enterprise against the woman who had ruined Claire's brother's life and her partner. Their company was not only built on fraud, but was also collaborating with online scam syndicates. I didn't have to fabricate a thing. Every piece of evidence I turned over to the authorities was real. People who build their empires on crime rarely go clean. They always fall back on old habits. Their massive corporation collapsed, and they both faced the full force of the law. And with that, I had fulfilled the silent promise I made to Claire all those years ago. Of course, taking on such an entrenched and powerful enemy, on top of my usual work hammering various scoundrels with lawsuits, brought its own set of troubles. Better safe than sorry. I upgraded the security for myself, my wife, and our 2 children, leaving no openings for anyone with ill intent. By now, I'm a pretty big deal. Nearly a decade of relentless litigation has earned me the title of the greatest cyber vigilante and paved the way for my success. Today, I have my own company. I support Claire's thriving law firm, and together we run the nation's largest private anti-cyberbullying foundation and legal aid team. Our work has even expanded to related fields like school bullying and domestic violence. I'm a busy man. Years ago, when a hooded man with a fruit knife came at me, I had to kick him myself. Now, when Jessica tried to force her way into my company building, she was instantly flagged by the facial recognition system at the entrance, and security had her pinned to the ground in seconds. The idea of some random person storming the CEO's office? Not on my watch. Ethan, I'm so sorry. Please forgive me, Ethan. I was crazy back then. Kyle tricked me. You know what they say, the one that got away will haunt you for life. I know it's real now. Please, just give me one more chance, at least. At least see me one more time. Jessica's screams from the lobby were desperate, but there was a manic edge to her voice that suggested she wasn't mentally stable. So, was I soft-hearted enough to go down and see her one last time to get some closure? Are you kidding me? I'm the guy who lives and breathes by the letter of the law. I made one phone call to 911. My ex-girlfriend, who was on parole, was taken away for disturbing the peace. The fear of being sent back to prison was enough to make her behave. Later, I heard that she couldn't handle the pressures of life on the outside. She had a mental breakdown, drugged Kyle and her few remaining family members, and then turned on the gas. But what does that have to do with me? I have to finish planning this week's trip to rural communities to give legal literacy seminars. My wife and my 2 kids need me. Every day is a bright new day, and I'm a very busy man. This life, with Claire by my side, has been happy and fulfilling. 8. Bonus chapter: you really did do better than me. You're a real man. Compared to you, I was a coward. But I keep my promises. Here's the gift I mentioned. In a daze, I heard that familiar voice one last time. And then I woke up. My phone was still lit up on my nightstand, displaying that same absurd story about the designer whose girlfriend stole his portfolio. The text seemed to have changed, but I had no interest in reading that garbage again. A strange sense of destiny urged me to get up and open the front door. My gift had arrived. I opened the door, and there she was. Claire, looking as young as I felt, waiting for me outside, her eyes shimmering with tears and her lips curved into a beautiful smile. In the next moment, we were in each other's arms, overwhelmed with the joy of knowing we had the chance to live our lives together all over again. Yendi,